What's going on, everybody? My name is Derailious. Welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be talking about the state of the Catacombs. And let me be clear here, I'm going to be going over the good and the bad when it comes to the entirety of the Catacombs. Before we begin though, I do want to make the note only a small percentage of you guys are subbed. So please hit that button down below, it does mean a ton. Let's try to aim for 10.5k after this video. As well, I want to make the note, all of the footage you are going to be seeing after this point will be from my live streams down below, twitch.tv/Derailious. Please do check it out. It does mean a ton. Give me your primes. You'll love to see it. And on that note, let's get right into this. To start off here, before I actually get into what I want to talk about, I just want to say if any of you have had any experiences at all in dungeons, please do write them out down below. I really want to hear other people's experiences on this. I understand that as a YouTuber, I kind of have this advantage where, more people are willing to take me into runs, carry me, and things like that. And I will be the first to admit that I have been carried before, except not for monetary payment. I do also have experiences with struggle in dungeons, and I kind of want to get into that as well. So now let's talk about Catacombs. As a whole, I think Catacombs was a brilliant experiment. It worked out pretty well overall, and I think that the biggest problems with Catacombs is in execution and not in design. And I'll get into why in a minute. But to start off, I want to try to think of a scenario. And this scenario is probably one that has happened to each and every one of you. You load into something on the party finder, you find a pretty decent looking party, you load into the dungeon, 3 people leave, and now you cannot do the dungeon. This is something that has happened to everyone at least 50 times. And at the very least, it has happened to me at least 50 times. I am not the most prolific Dungeons player. I've done about 30 floor 7s, I've done about 100 of floor 5, and that is the most of any floor that I've done. I've done maybe 50 or 60 floor 4s, something around that amount for floor 6. I have not done very many dungeon runs. However, it has happened to me at least 50 times. Before I became someone who used to party up with friends, and now I feel like I'm more capable of doing these higher level dungeons, I used to be someone who used the party finder exclusively. And I think the party finder is the worst system in Hypixel Skyblock. There's a lot of reasons I have for thinking this, but the biggest one is it does not determine skill. And players who are bad at the game and do not know what they're doing try to get into runs that they have no business being in. And that is a big problem. Aside from that, the party finder does not actually promote good players at all. It does not take into account prior completions. It does not take into account the amount of prior completions. It does not take into account your fastest run ever, or how much damage you do, or how many times you die per run, or how many puzzles you failed recently. It takes none of this into account. It only takes your Catacombs level. And while your Catacombs level is a decent enough indicator of how many dungeons you have done, it is not a good indicator at all. Someone could have just bought up 10 to 20 floor 7 carries for about 50 million coins if they really wanted to, and try to go into floor 7 and act like they're a god when they're Cata 24. And at the end of the day, they're going to fail, because they do not have the gear or the items or the literal anything, the knowledge necessary in order to do the dungeon. And I know that's a very extreme example, and it probably doesn't happen much, but there are kids who spend hundreds of dollars on this game to get Hyperions, and they don't know how to do dungeons. They have no clue. They die twice, and they're using a Hyperion, the strongest weapon in the game, and that gets into another problem. I think that, personally, Dungeons gear has been executed relatively poorly. The reason I think this is because for floor 7 at least, and this is just for floor 7, there are only 2 legitimately great classes, Archer and Mage. If you are neither of those classes, you are not pro. That is basically how it works. You can, in theory, be a Berserker, and you can, in theory, be a healer, but those are more limited and are not as generally good as a Mage. Tanks, on the other hand, get completely obliterated in floor 7s. The only time I've ever seen a tank actually be wanted or used is for guiding around Necron, and that can be done by literally any class, in theory. I think that floor 7 is executed really well. I love floor 7's puzzles. I think floor 7's puzzles are amazing. I just think that the party finder used to get a lot of these runs together is terribly made. And I don't really have a solution for how to do it better. You could, in theory, argue that maybe it should point in the direction of a Discord server, something officially owned by Hypixel and something moderated by it, but I would also say that Discord is a really bad service if you want the most safety. I understand that there are a lot of safety services on Discord, but pointing someone in the direction of a third-party app in order to get dungeon runs, that's risky when you're dealing with younger kids, and I kind of understand that. I would also make the argument that Floor 7 is done really well loot-wise in terms of the rewards. The payoffs in Floor 7 are insane. Getting a Necron's handle feels like getting a Galahorn in Destiny, and for those who don't understand what I mean by that, it's basically like pulling a Phoenix pet. It is an insane moment, it is a really fun moment, and I'm not gonna lie, me pulling a Wither chest piece on my second run ever, and then again on my 30th run, they were really great experiences, and they felt really great. I felt really fulfilled, I felt like my runs were worth it, and that's honestly a great experience. However, all of this is held back by the possible and definitely happening hundreds of runs that are being failed constantly by poor players on the Party Finder. Now I understand, the Party Finder needs to exist, otherwise dungeons would be entirely useless. However, I just wish that dungeons wasn't really such an optional piece of content. It kind of feels like they're trying to shoot for two things at once. Dungeons having the best gear in the game, and dungeons being optional content that you don't necessarily have to participate in. You cannot have both of those be a thing at the same time, because you are going to get the problems seen above. Because dungeons is not completely optional, but also not entirely mandatory, you have the issue of players who want to get the endgame gear, but need completions to do so. And so what are they going to do? They're going to beg higher level players who have all these items, who have grinded out the dungeon, to give them a carry. And that creates a way more toxic and poor atmosphere than if it didn't happen in the first place. Because that just leads to people scamming each other, that just leads to people buying runs off of each other, and generally makes the community a worse place. I wish that Catacombs was made a more in tune part of the experience, and I really like the idea that Floor 7 is legitimately difficult content. Legitimately difficult content is something we needed in Skyblock, but it's also made worse by the fact that Floor 6, in my opinion, is the worst floor of the Catacombs, for the simple reason that it takes forever to complete and gives you no actual legitimate XP award. Let's be real here, getting about 8,000 XP sounds really great, but the problem is an average Floor 6 run takes twice the time of a really fast Floor 7 run, rewarding about a third of the experience. That is not good. That is really bad. It's not even that much less difficult. To be honest, I've seen the same amount of people die on Floor 6 than I have on Floor 7. I've seen mages who survive Floor 7 get obliterated on Floor 6 because they just don't have enough defense to survive the terracotta, and they keep coming back. If you have a laggy party, and let's be real here, lag is a very common thing in the Catacombs, you are going to be sitting in Floor 6 for 15 minutes. There is no way to speed that up. You just have to wait for the timer to slowly trickle down. And not to mention the animations. The animations between phases on Floor 6 are way too long. They're absurd. Why are they so long? Whenever Necron goes from one phase to another, it takes a solid 8 seconds, and I'm pretty sure you can damage him between phase 3 and 4. And on top of that, the phase 1 and 2 segment takes about 10 seconds max. Phase 2 and 3, you don't even have to go between that, because there isn't a cutscene. Necron just follows you into the hole. Floor 7 is executed really, really well. I love it. I think it's the best floor in the Catacombs by a mile. But it's made worse, and all these problems are compounded by the fact that no one can get up to Floor 7 because you have to grind out Floor 6. And Floor 6 is the worst floor to grind by a mile. So where does this stand? We have a dungeon floor that's really amazing in Floor 7, a dungeon floor that's really bad in Floor 6, and Floor 1s through 5 are pretty okay. 1 through 5 is probably a pretty simple overall system. I like the way they're all executed. I think they're all great. So what's the solution to a lot of these issues? Well, to start off, I would either lower the amount of time between phases on Floor 6, remove the ability for the terracotta to respawn and just make it so if you kill them, they're gone forever, or just lower the overall amount of time Floor 6 takes, or increase the amount of XP from about 8,000 per to about 12 to 15,000 per. That sounds like a really substantial increase, and people might say, oh, well then why grind Floor 7? But the truth is, Floor 7's loot is so much better than Floor 6's in terms of monetary value that of course people are going to grind out Floor 7 anyway. Plus, your runs will definitely still be faster on Floor 7 if you have a good group. I think personally that the party finder should be changed. However, how it should be changed is unknown to me. I am not a game dev. I just know when things are bad. I do not know how to fix them, and honestly, I don't know how to. It seems like a very difficult problem to solve, and I understand the devs not wanting to touch something like that because, to be honest, who would? It's such a broken and buggy system as is. Like, the fact that we even have to think about an idea like an inventory wipe is insane to me. Another problem with Catacombs, and this is a more minor problem in my opinion, is the general bugginess of it. I think that some of the bugs should actually be made game features. I really like the concept that you can fly in Floor 7. That feels really cool, it feels really powerful, and you still can get obliterated by Necron. It doesn't make the floor an easy cakewalk, it just makes it more livable than, for instance, if you couldn't fly. And I think that's why the admins have been so not prone to patching it out. I also think that the inventory wipe glitches should be looked at immediately. The fact that something like that can even happen, especially when you're dealing with players who have spent legitimate money on the game, and just saying, whoops, your inventory got wiped, should have made a reparty, is kind of ridiculous to me. At the very least, I would argue that refunds should be offered to people who lose their items in this way, but at the end of the day, I don't make the rules on this. I just think that needs to be patched out of the game immediately. When you're dealing with people's legitimate money, it becomes an entirely different circumstance than it was before that. Before that, like before booster cookies came out, if there was an inventory wipe glitch, I would obviously think they needed to fix it, but I would understand their hesitance to give people their items back, because that can lead to a lot, and I mean a lot, of fraudulent claims. However, now, when you're dealing with people's legitimate dollars, I don't really like that concept. At the end of the day, though, I think Dungeons has been executed generally pretty well. The loot, although a little bit overpowered in some senses, is not bad, and certainly really interesting. I really do hope that the Forge, when it comes out, will help out with closing the gap between, high-end players and lower-end players, but at the end of the day, we'll see how that works. I generally liked the Catacombs. I thought it was a really fun experience for the most part, and although I don't like Floor 6 at all, I've liked every other floor. I think that generally, Catacombs can be further improved with time, and when the devs get back to work on it, I really hope they work on fixing up and patching out all of these problems, all of these issues that have been plaguing it since it has come out. Because honestly, at its core, it's a really fun 5-player experience. The problem is, getting those 5 players together is a pain in the ass, and only a couple classes are even viable at the end of the day. On that note, I don't want to keep you here too long. I just wanted to make this a long expose kind of video. I don't really make expose kind of videos often. I don't really, have much of a vested interest in doing something like that. However, I thought this was a good enough topic as any. I have been grinding out a lot of Floor 7s on my Twitch channel. As you can see, this footage was all from that. So if you want to check me out, please do check it out down below. It does mean a ton. On that note, see you all in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Derailious, and peace out, everybody.